Greetings, programs, and welcome back to the Awesome Friday podcast. I'm your host. My name is Matthew, and joining me, as is usual, is Simon. Say hello, Simon.
Under practice. Hello. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for another Awesome Friday podcast. I hope you're well.
This week, it's going to be a little different than normal. We're not talking about two movies. We're talking about several because we have been attending, in air quotes, virtually the Fantasia Film Festival out of Montreal, which is one of the big genre festivals here in North America. But before we do that, let's just quickly get some housekeeping out of the way. First of all, is if you're listening to this, first off, just thank you. Thank you for listening. We love you very much. And if you like what you're hearing, we do have a Patreon, which you can subscribe to support the show and keep it going and help us expand our filmmaking, film viewing horizons at patreon.com/mcsimpson. Lowest tier is $2 a month, Canadian as well. So if you're literally anywhere else in the world, it's less than that. And you get bonus chats every week, and we're also starting to open up some questions to our patrons. So I think it's really fun and exciting. I think Simon agrees. Just say you agree. It's fine.
I agree.
Also, if you want to find us and support the show, we're on all the socials, so just head to awesomefriday.ca and follow us wherever you like to follow things, and give us a like and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Most importantly, right now, we'd like to acknowledge that this podcast and this festival are taking place during the ongoing 2023 SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes, and we are in full support of those. We are doing this in compliance with the guidelines set forth by the WGA and SAG-AFTRA, which I actually did reach out to and get the lowdown on. But at the end of the day, none of the films we're talking about, good or bad, could have been made by artificial intelligence, and they could not have been made without the labor and the creativity of the writers and performers who are responsible for creating them. So we very much support the unions. We hope that the AMPTP gets back to the table soon. I have no faith that they will, get based on all the news that's coming out of what's going on in Hollywood right now. But union strong, WGA strong, SAG-AFTRA strong. Yeah, that's basically it for the housekeeping stuff. Simon, how are you?
Good. I like listening to all your housekeeping stuff. You're so good at the intros now. I just sit back and just let you ride that wave. Yeah,
I feel like I'm not that good at it. I feel like I'm struggling through it every time.
No, it's fine. It's good. It's good. You get the seal of approval. Yeah, pay your damn actors and damn writers, because everything we're talking about today, for even if the movies didn't land completely, I have got like unmistakable human touches, and these are the things we're going to lose. But I'm good. I'm fine. I have a friend staying with me, and it's her last day today, and so she wanted to treat my children to the Breakfast of Champions. Now, get your mind out of the gutter. The Breakfast of Champions in my house is a Boxing Day tradition we have that I started one year when I was probably still a bit hungover, and I basically tried to design the unhealthiest breakfast I could think of out of all the things we have in cupboards. So basically, the Breakfast of Champions is pancakes, ice cream, Lucky Charms, maple syrup, and cupcake sprinkles, all piled high on a plate. And
so it's just breakfast then.
Well, that's the thing. So this is legendary in our house as being this unhealthy thing, and they missed it last Boxing Day because we'd flown them to England, and so all we've heard about, we missed Breakfast of Champions. Yes, that's because we'd spent $10,000 taking you to England. So my friend wanted to thank the kids by surprising them with Breakfast of Champions. And it is so unhealthy. And as I said to them this morning, in many parts of countries like America, this is just breakfast. This is a normal breakfast. We are eating breakfast items. And the Lucky Charms, which we bought a type of Lucky Charms that have extra sugary diamonds in them. And I don't need any more sugar today. I'm like buzzing. So I had a plate full, and then I had extra pancakes and everything. So
my all-time favorite comic strip has always been Calvin and Hobbes, and Calvin eats cereal called chocolate frosted sugar bombs, and I feel like it felt like an exaggeration in the 90s. and I feel like maybe it's not so much anymore, or
Oh
maybe
my
it never
god.
was. Like it's I have definitely eaten a lot of bad cereal,
This
amazingly terrible cereal in my life.
I am constantly floored by the section in our local Save-On that is basically the anti-dentist breakfast section, and the multiple ways you can destroy your life by eating all these different boxes of sugar. And my kids eat pretty healthy, and occasionally they're like, "Can we get these cinnamon Lucky Charms with like chocolate bars in them and whatever?" I'm like, no, like that's child abuse. No, you can't until Breakfast of Champions, and then all bets are off. I did think of you this morning because we had spare pancakes, and my friend was like, "Oh, we've eaten so much. I don't think we could eat anymore." I'm like, "This wouldn't be a problem for Matt here. Like this is standard practice for Matt to eat 3 or 4 bowls of Breakfast of Champions."
I mean, the downside to that is that I'm definitely overweight, but I could probably help you with that.
But you're so, as my wife said, you're so tall. Like she's and so yeah, Matt can eat anything. I just heard he's got tall legs. Like that's her definition. Like you can eat whatever you want
Hmm.
because you're so huge. You can just eat whatever you want.
Yeah,
You
but
lucky
I'm
girl.
definitely I could stand to lose like 20 or 30 or 40 pounds, and
As I like to define my body shape, I've gone from athletic to brawler, and so I'm sure you could do the same.
sure. I would like to stop. I would like to get to the point where I no longer have sleep apnea anymore. How about that?
Okay,
Let's
that
see.
would be great.
Yeah,
That's good first step.
and I'm 90% sure that that is just means losing somewhere between 20 and 40 pounds.
We could get one of those 12 monkeys machines and sleep in that setup all night, so you can actually breathe.
That's what I'm trying to avoid. Because, like,
Uh,
anyway, I don't want to talk about my ongoing health problems, but yeah, it's a whole thing. Uh,
what should we? So, what should we talk about? Which film do you want to talk about first at Fantasia?
I mean, there's just so many.
Fantasia is one of my favorite festivals, by the way. Out of all the ones we've done, I love Vancouver Asian Film Festival and Fantasia because there's stuff in those that I don't see anywhere else, like ideas and films.
So yeah, it's actually been
I love
interesting.
it.
I'm on holiday right now, and so I keep having to try to like find times to watch these screeners
Mm.
because I'm expected to spend time with my family. Uh, which to be fair,
Are you okay? Are
which
you
to be
okay?
fair, I enjoy, but it does mean that like I was definitely stayed up until like 4 in the morning watching 2 films night before
Oh
last, and up to like 2 in the morning
no! Oh
last night
dude!
watching a movie.
Oh no!
Um, but like, there's just the problem. The thing is that with Fantasia, Fantasia holds a special place in my heart because it was the first festival outside of Vancouver that I actually got accredited for as a
Oh
member of the
cool.
press. But it's also this is it's at least fourth Fantasia. I think 2020, 21, 22, and 23. So I was
Hmm.
in my fourth, and there is always stuff that I will just never see anywhere else, and
Hmm.
I do love it for that. Like Vancouver International Film Festival is probably my favorite because I live in Vancouver and it's the biggest one that's here. And friends come out from out of town so I get to see them. And there's always big
Hmm.
releases, and there's often a lot of good foreign stuff. But there's stuff at Fantasia that I will just never see again.
Hmm.
So I'm even when I see stuff, and there's at least one in here that we're going to talk about. That I'm going to like go to bat for a little bit, just because even though I don't really like it, because it's something you will just never see anywhere else, and I find that there's
Hmm.
value in that. So yeah,
Definitely.
Fantasia, and to a lesser extent, but it's on the same sort of vibe level. Would be Fantastic Fest out of Austin in the States has a lot of the similar genre
Hmm.
vibe to it.
Hmm.
Festival de Nouveau Cinema in also in Montreal. I just love film festivals. It's not because I'm watching a lot of films. I mean, it is, but it's because I get to see a lot of stuff I'd never get to see again. I think we've talked about
Hmm.
before, like one of the things I really appreciate about Vancouver International Film Festival is that every single year there's a film, and it's most of the time it's French, occasionally it's Spanish, where
Hmm.
it's just an amazing film from that country that
Hmm.
I will just never get to see again because they don't get released here, but they get to play at these festivals, and I get to be
Hmm.
exposed to them.
Yeah, definitely.
um, and I I I I just wish that film was distributed more globally. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And a great example of that, um, out of VIF, there was a film. I think it was in 2020, it's 2019 or 2020, called "Who You Think I Am," which is French, uh, starring Juliette Binoche, about a woman who basically catfishes a man. It's an amazing, fun drama with a great lead performance, um,
Mm.
and it just never went anywhere. It's got like 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, as far as I know. Well reviewed everywhere. Never released in North America, as far as I can tell.
What? Has it always been like this? Like, are we? When you were younger, I know you worked in a cinema for a while, so you probably had a bit more access to this. But I feel like when I started going to multiplexes, when I got out of my single screen small town and into multiplexes, it felt like there was more opportunities to watch smaller things that would show for 1 or 2 weeks in different languages. And I look at the main multiplexes now, and it seems more to be big shows over multiple screens taking over everything instead of the occasional like foreign film. International Village will show some great Punjabi stuff and Indian language stuff, and that's great. But uh, I feel like the opportunities, just as you're saying, the opportunities to watch European cinema or different language cinema in the wild seem to be getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, and I'm sure that, like, you know, a lot of that is the, for lack of a better term, the Disneyfication of the Cineplex. Like, you know, Disney's able to just be like, you need to show our latest thing on all of your screens, or you just can't show it. You know, they
Mm,
have this power that they didn't necessarily used to have. Um,
mhm,
but also, I just think that there's a, and I'm trying not to offend like everyone who listens to this podcast, but like I do feel like there's an incuriosity, uh, about foreign cinema, and I think because of just it being in other languages and having to read subtitles.
mm,
Um, Another great film that comes to mind is one that was from 2018, 2017, a Spanish film that it's called, The Realm, um, which the closest approximation I could think of would be that it was like a Spanish Michael Clayton. And if you watch Michael Clayton, you know
mm,
like what kind of praise that is. But
mm,
it's about a man. It's also called The Candidate in some places where it was released. Um, but like it won 7 Goya awards, which are the Spanish uh, version of the Oscars, basically.
mm,
And um, what's his name? Antonio de la Torre is an amazing actor who I don't think has ever worked outside of Spain.
mm,
We just never see him, you know, like
mm.
in Canada and North America.
Yeah.
And this is a film that's like a high stakes thriller about a corrupt politician who's trying to save his reputation, and it's really good, and
Huh.
you just can't find it. It's just not around in a meaningful way, um, and I find that really upsetting. I just do. Um,
Do you
so
find?
what I love about film festivals is that I get to see these films that I would otherwise never
Yeah.
see.
Is there a streaming service that you think is particularly good for showing these kind of things?
Well, no, the problem is now that there's so many, right?
Mm.
So I think The Realm is actually technically available, and it's on. I'll just watch it right now. Yeah, so it is available. It's on a streaming service called Ovid, which I have to this moment never heard of.
What?
Um, yeah, never heard of it. Let's look up
Is that
who you
exclusive? Maybe they've got
think I
like
am.
licensing to be shown somewhere else.
I don't know. Yeah, Who You Think I Am is not available. And that's in a great movie. Like, if you're familiar with the work of Juliette Binoche, then you just know that that's a great movie. It's about a divorced school teacher who catfishes a 24-year-old man to and has a whole like
Wow.
it's so good. But like I said, and like there's other films. There's another pretty fine movie called what was it called? It's like In the Name of the Land or something like that. It's a French film about a farmer, about the struggle of being a farmer in modern times. That was really good a year or two ago, and it is technically available on Videotron in Quebec only. Right? It's
Wow.
so like we're just at this place where these things just don't get the distribution I feel like they deserve.
Yeah.
And I could rant about this for longer than the what feels like 10 minutes I've been ranting about it now.
It's especially frustrating when I saw in 2019 at the Vancouver Asian Film Festival, I saw a Thai film that I've talked about many times before to you and to Rachel and Dakota as well about, uh, called Where We Belong, which was really touched me. Just about a girl getting ready to go away to learn English and leave her family and leave her friend, and it's just wonderful. And I've never seen that anywhere in any service for anyone to watch. I've never even seen it. I've tried to buy it on Blu-ray a couple of times. I can't find it anywhere,
Hmm.
and it's just it's a real shame because it's a standout movie. I haven't ever stopped thinking about it.
I mean, another great example of that would be, and we're going to talk about this director's follow-up film in this episode, but Beyond the
Mm,
Infinite 2 Minutes is now available on Blu-ray in North America 3 years later.
mm. That'd be
Um,
worth it. I wonder what the extras are like on that. That'd be worth it.
yeah,
With
and
Blu-ray.
that's an amazing Japanese film that just like,
Mm,
and you can buy it on iTunes. It's actually, if you're listening and you're in Canada right now, Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes is both a 99-cent rental and a $2 purchase, and is worth every single one of those pennies.
yeah, it's fantastic.
And you should definitely check it out at least once. It's
Mhm,
an amazingly constructed, designed to be a single take movie about a time loop, and it's amazing.
mhm. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I do love film festivals. I think was the question you were asking. I think 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the reason I love festivals. It's not just that I get to watch a lot of films; it's that I get to watch a lot of films
Mhm,
that I wouldn't otherwise get to really see,
mhm.
and then I get to be the champion of them for everyone who's listening and everyone who is in a 20-foot radius of me at any given moment.
Good. So
uh,
we're going to talk about some films that we've seen at Fantasia this year,
yeah,
and you've seen more than me, so do you want to start with one?
yeah. So I think we're just gonna alternate, and it's pretty much gonna go like two me and then one you, and then two me and then one you. Um, because I've seen more. And but feel free, we're going to chime in on some of the ones we've both seen, and we're going to start with one um, that I think is super interesting and has been kind of stuck in my brain, but I don't really like. But also, like, I completely recognize the value of, and I find it a really interesting conversation. I know that you think it's just total bullshit, Simon, but
Oh,
but
yeah.
uh, but there's a movie playing at Fantasia called Hundreds of Beavers, and it is the most singularly unhinged, weird ass thing that I've seen all year. It is basically a mashup of the Treehouse Friends or Happy Tree Friends, whatever they were called, that super ultra violent cartoon, and
Hmm.
also Keystone Cops. Um, it's and like I don't know how else to describe this movie. It's about in terms of its like tone and genre, but it's about a man who's lost in the woods who eventually has to face off against hundreds of beavers, and it is shot and directed like a live action version of a 1910s cartoon with a violent twist, and it did not exactly land for me. And again, I know, Simon, I know that you did not like it at all,
No.
but also like as a repudiation of everything the studio system is trying to do today, I think it has value. I think it's an interesting piece of the cinema landscape, at least. And I can't, in good conscience, necessarily recommend anyone watch it. But at the same time, I think it's interesting and good that it's out there. Is that is that
So
a fair thing to say? Like, it is
I
not.
think it's
It's
fair.
not. It's not. It's not good. It's not. But it is super interesting.
It's-
And it has been stuck in my brain for days. So do with
So
that information what you will.
all art is valid. So yes, it's valid, and even if your reaction is negative like mine, it's an interesting experiment, but I don't think stylistically it works. I see what everything you say is true in that it's the furthest away from modern movie structure that you could probably conceive of. It is, uh, I think, intentionally jarring and ugly to watch. It's not visually pretty. It's but I
I mean,
think a
it's
lot of the
also
cartoons that it's referencing, like if you look at something like the video game Jughead that references a similar era of animation, I think stylistically it doesn't quite capture what it thinks it's capturing. Like it doesn't, the flow of it. It's the
so
it's so jarring
yeah.
to watch. I don't think it's successful in what it's trying to do fundamentally.
I will say that I don't think that I think that it's trying to emulate too many different things in terms of its visual style, in terms of the like homage a cartoon,
Hmm.
because it's shot and edited like it's something from the 1920s, but
Hmm.
it also looks like it's mimicking that sort of like we don't have any money, we're gonna do 5 frames of
Mm.
animation in one style
Yes,
of like the Hanna-Barbera 70s, and it is a bit
yes.
jarring, to be
It,
fair.
it it does have a bootleg comic kind of look, like
Yeah.
a zine kind of thing, and which is fine when you've got aggressively aggressive kind of art in a zine. Frame by frame is different from watching it something presented as a movie, and I don't think it has. I think you these kind of things should have a strong black humor to them, so they've got to be funny in a dark way, and I don't think this film is as funny as it thinks it is. The dark humor doesn't land for me at all, and I think you're meant to think it's fun but ridiculous, but just it's an incredibly ugly thing to watch, and I don't think it emulates the style that it thinks it is. If that makes sense.
I mean, if anything, at times I would argue that it doesn't go far enough. Like I don't know, there's definitely a scene like the man in the woods ends up losing all of his clothes and he has to kill a raccoon, which ends up with him wearing like a giant coonskin hat, which is a little bit funny. But like the scenes of all of that, it's it would be better, I think, if it was closer to Treehouse Friends. Like if it was more
Hmm.
violent, more bloody,
Hmm.
I think it might be more successful. Um,
Yeah,
but again, like this movie didn't exactly work for me. But again, I think it's interesting and important that it's out there, just as a thing to be like, you know what, we can do a thing that isn't the way everyone else is doing it,
yeah,
and I don't regret having watched it, even though I didn't like it. It's interesting to me.
yeah. I don't really disagree. I think it's so important if you're trying to become any artist really is to expose yourself to things that are outside of the norm, so you don't fall into the set of tropes that so many others are doing. It's not at all a marketable style, so
Yeah,
but it is. I I think
it's
you get more from looking at a zine. You'd get more looking at from early, like what's the cat, the Betty Boop era cat that was banned because it was so violent in this style, this animation style. I'm sure somebody knows
uh,
one. Felix Flicks the
yeah,
cat. Flicks the
Felix
cat.
the cat. Yeah,
I think that would be a more, if you're interested in analyzing this style, I think that is far more successful and far less jarring because it has a black humor and the style is clean as well. And this doesn't really have any of that. So
mm,
sure, it's interesting to have an opinion on it, but I don't think it's successful in what it's trying to do.
yeah, that's fair. Um, but it is out there, and you can watch it if you want. Uh, I'll be interested to hear anyone who watches it. I'll be interested to hear what your take is.
Yeah.
But
I
let's move
imagine
on.
I
Oh, sorry,
imagine
go.
if you're really high, I imagine that film probably lands a bit better for you.
Yeah, and just going back to what we were talking about earlier, like this is exactly the kind of thing that like if you go to film festivals, you're going to see movies like this that are weird and
Yes.
challenging and not necessarily
Yes.
good but interesting that are out there. And
Hmm.
because this is never going to get any kind of wide release anywhere. It's just
Hmm.
it's too esoteric and weird.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so I'm again, I don't regret having seen it. I It's definitely not going to be for most people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um I was going to say everyone, but no, it's most people. It's not going to be for.
Hmm.
But I know at least one person, one that is like loves it. So it's one of those
Oh,
films that
really?
if you like it, you are going to love it, and if you
Yeah.
don't like it, it's fine. It's good that it exists.
Yeah, absolutely. If
Yeah,
you're in that little niche bubble, this is going to work for you really well.
yeah. But let's move on. I don't think we need to do star ratings on any of these, but
Okay,
I think our will be
I'm going to do
effusive
star
enough.
ratings. I'm not doing a star rating for this because I don't think it's fair because I didn't finish it. But I will be offering a star opinion on some others for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. I would say that this would be 2 stars for me, but see it, maybe see it anyway.
Hmm.
Let's move on to another one I think you did not see,
Okay.
called Rebirth,
Hmm.
which I believe is going to be a Shudder original. Um, Playing at Fantasia. It stars, let me just look it up so I don't get it wrong.
Someone from Scrubs, apparently, though I didn't recognize the name.
Yeah, Judy Reyes, who is actually a very talented actress. She's been in a number of things since Scrubs. Um, she played the nurse Carla on Scrubs.
Oh, is that? Oh, good.
Yeah, but this is Birth Rebirth. It stars her and Marin Ireland. It is directed by Laura Moss, and it was written by Laura Moss and Brendan Jameson O'Brien. And it's about a single mother, played by Reyes, who has a young daughter. And very early in the film, the daughter contracts and dies from viral meningitis. Um, Marin Ireland plays a uh, a mortuary technician or a morgue technician in a hospital who's obviously very smart and obviously has she's on the spectrum somehow. It's never stated, but it's very much implied by the performance that she's on the spectrum somehow, who has been developing a cure for death and
Hmm.
revives this young girl. Um, and it's billed as being like a modern sort of feminist motherhood twist on Frankenstein.
Hmm.
And it's okay. It's pretty okay. This is actually on a similar theme to the last film. I would say that the problem with it is that it doesn't go far enough in any one direction.
Hmm.
It sort of plays it, I think, a lot too safe with the themes, um, and with some of the. I think all the performances are great. I think Marin Ireland is a very underrated actress. I think Judy Reyes is also a very underrated actress. I think that they're very much doing the best they can with some of the material that they have. I think that the script has a couple of hitches in it that hold it back from being sort of a truly great movie.
Hmm.
But like, it's not enough of a horror film. It's not contemplative enough as a psychological thriller. Um, it just doesn't. Again, it doesn't really go. It doesn't really deal with the idea of like motherhood as it equates to being a woman. And
Hmm.
I feel like maybe I'm not the right person to be commenting on this, but just I just don't think it goes far enough with any of those conversations or any of those
Hmm.
ideas to be truly great. But it does have 2 really great performances in it, and there is one really unsettling scene involving the Frankenstein little girl, um,
Oh,
but there's not enough of any of it, you know. And it's only I think it's 100 minutes, it's 98 minutes, something like that.
there's a
So
lot to be said. Yeah.
there's room for all of this to be there,
Hmm.
and I feel like again like it could it could have gone way further into like the gory horror elements. It could have gone a
Hmm.
lot further into the like psychological elements of just like confronting your reanimated child. uh, but it doesn't do that, and so I can't say it's great, but it is worth seeing because there's 2 great performances in it.
Is it a flatliner situation? Has the dead child brought something back with it?
No, no, it doesn't go in. I mean, that's another idea that they could have explored but did not.
In the marketing for this film, it described how so many people fainted watching this in a previous film festival. Is that just hyperbole, or is there a section? You mentioned one bit, but is it a fainty kind of movie?
No, I don't get that at all. I don't want to say that those marketing people are lying, but also
It's
but I
marketing, right?
also but I also don't know what would make anyone faint in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the most upsetting scene in the whole movie is actually just a straight up murder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, but again, it doesn't really go far enough with what it's trying to say about the person who commits that murder. So
Yeah.
it's uh, it's just very safe. Like it feels
Mm.
like they brush up against something that's a little bit dangerous and went, let's pull it back instead
Oh,
of
it's
you know.
interesting.
Um, so again, it's not bad. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not great. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but again, two great lead performances. So when it's
Yeah.
available to you, totally check it out for yourself.
Cool. I might check that out. Now, I avoided it a little bit based on the description, but that sounds like something I could deal with. And it sounded. I love the setup, so I'll try and catch that.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to one of the ones that you did see. Do you want to talk about the Star Wars one first or the time
Yeah.
travel one first?
Well, let's talk about the Star Wars one first.
Okay, let's talk about the Star Wars one.
Mm-hmm.
So let's give us the lowdown on the documentary A Disturbance in the Force.
So the documentary Disturbance in the Force is all about the once mythical Star Wars holiday special, which was made in late 77 by a marketing department who suddenly had a hit on their hands with Star Wars and wanted to keep the public awareness of Star Wars and all the characters going. Um, this is even before the second film had started in pre-production, and it was pretty normal at the time to do this, to keep the characters from popular movies and put them as guest appearances in holiday variety shows with like Bing Crosby and other old cardigan wearing singers, where they would do really embarrassing like fusion jazz dances and things like that. It was pretty standard fare, and there is actually a section in this documentary that compares other TV at the time, and suddenly the Star Wars Holiday Special doesn't stand out. It does by today's standards, and it has a reputation for being awful because it is awful. So this documentary kind of does two things. It talks a lot about it, like, hey, do you remember this kind of thing, and compares it to TV at the time. And then to the lesser part, it talks about how it got to that part. It talks to some of the writers, it talks to some of the creative team. It brings together interviews that they'd previously done as well to try and justify how it ever got to the point where you had Chewbacca's the first 9 minutes. There's no spoken words at all. It's just Wookiees roaring at each other, and there's Donnie and Marie Osmond dancing with stormtroopers, and it's just basically what was normal at the time, a marketing stunt that seems hilariously out of place, knowing what Star Wars becomes, that they had to grab at this terrible opportunity because they were worried the public would forget about Star Wars. Um, so it's basically a talking heads documentary. It's lots and lots of talking heads interviews, either talking about the nostalgia of it or interviews with talking heads who are involved in the making of it. And it's fine. Like, there's nothing in this I didn't already know. Um, it's the Star Wars Holiday Special because for a long time people weren't sure it was actually real because it didn't get rerun. It was passed along videotapes. Once it was acknowledged and released, and everyone's kind of talked about it a lot now. So the story of it is pretty well known, but I've really loved the part of this documentary that talked to the people who were actually involved in the making of it, in the kind of the drama of who came, who went, who they hired, and why they hired this variety performer with no experience of sci-fi whatsoever, but they knew how to put on a variety show, and I just love how that part came together. But I found it pretty lacking in that part. A lot of this documentary reminded me of those nostalgia. I call them like nostalgia documentaries, where that Much Music has on. Hey, do you remember '90s music? And it's got like Vanilla Rice talking about, yeah, I did this, and it's got MC Hammer saying this, and I don't find that interesting whatsoever. So it was a little heavy on the nostalgia talking head for me, and a little light on the part I really wanted to know about, which is how they got to the point that they got to.
Yeah, I can see that. For me, it did actually really work. The nostalgia hit pretty well. Um, but I will say that like you could also read the Wikipedia article and know everything this documentary is telling you.
Totally, totally.
But I feel like maybe we're the wrong audience for it because a lot of it is talking about like how did this even happen and why did it happen and like we lived that, man. And I feel like this documentary is made for people who are perhaps younger than us who just don't like didn't have to live through bootleg video cassettes in the 90s, people who don't
Mhm.
understand that there was even a time where stuff just wasn't available to them, like or that something like if they were going to do that again today, like it would be the most heavily marketed part of the Star Wars franchise, similar to what they did with the Guardians of the
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Galaxy holiday
Yeah.
special, which is a direct homage to that.
Yeah.
Um, that like the way studios operate today is totally different than the way it was, and I feel like again the nostalgia did work for me. Um, but again, I don't necessarily think that we were the target audience for it. Um, and I think if we were, it definitely would have been more of the surviving people who made the thing instead of people like Seth Green, who's just a big fan of it. Like there's a
Mm.
lot of talented people who talk about the influence of it on their work today, which I also think is interesting, but also they didn't get some of the people I wish they'd got. Like they talk a lot
Mm.
about Jon Favreau and his how he liked it and how it's influenced the Mandalorian and other Star Wars projects, but he's not
No,
there
they
to talk
just
about
they
it.
just use like a quick interview with him at a premiere. Like they didn't get him in.
Yeah, so
I,
I feel like I think what you're talking, the way you're trying to say it, I think you could boil down to like it's a documentary there's two competing stories and neither one of them really wins. But for me, the nostalgia did work, so I liked it.
Like I love the idea of everyone. The director left because he was doing something else, and then everyone else refused to cut it. So it was left with there's a man and a woman variety star who were variety singers, and suddenly she found that she had to edit this like 2 hour variety performance for Star Wars dancers, and I just loved that, just the shit show of it. I wish there'd
Yeah,
been more of that because I thought that was hilarious, but there was just too much of Kevin Smith going, "Yeah, I remember this." Like, I'm not interested in nostalgia talking heads. I really dislike it actually. That
yeah,
that kind of
that's fair.
that kind of TV. And there, as you say, there were very few people that they actually brought in for this. There was a lots of
I mean, honestly,
amalgamated past interviews.
that could just be that like the Star Wars Holiday Special was made by grown adult people in 1978 or
So they're
whatever
all
year it
dead.
was. So many of them are dead, right? But
I
I
like
feel
the
like
writing of
there's definitely it could have been two different documentaries. Maybe it should have been two
Mhm.
different documentaries. One about like how we made this, and the other about
Mm.
why it
Yeah,
perseveres today.
yeah.
Um, so maybe it's not enough of either, but like I say, the nostalgia bits did quite work for me. So, but also at the same time, I never have to watch it again. So take that under advisement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've been a bit broken as well by. I know it's a very different subject matter, but in terms of a documentary presentation, I've been a bit broken by Moon Age. Whoa! Oh my god!
You
Moon
mean
Age
the Bowie
Daydream.
documentary? Yeah.
Moon Age Daydream. Have I got the name right? I've been a
Hmm.
bit broken by that because I was just I hadn't seen that guy's previous documentaries, and to have a documentary that has zero talking heads in it and still be so effective at telling a story, I'm like, oh, okay. Documentaries need to work a bit harder now for me because, like, I don't want to hear people talking about memory anymore. I want to see it in context. I want to see a more creative approach to it. And I know
So that's a
Bowie lends
whole.
itself. I know Bowie lends itself to that Moon Age Daydream presentation that Star Wars probably doesn't. But just generally speaking, I'm kind of done with talking heads off camera. Know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
think maybe part of the reason, because that is definitely a style of documentary, right? Another really great
Hmm.
example. of that style of documentary would be Senna, which I think is 2009, 2010,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which is all about the race car driver Ayrton Senna, and it is told in the same sort of style as the Bowie doc, in that like
Mm-hmm.
there's very few talking heads. It's mostly archival footage and like archival interviews and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a wonderful piece of filmmaking. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you should, if you've never seen it, you should definitely check it out, because that dude led a really interesting life, and the way they present it is really, really engrossing. But that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't at this
That's
film
good.
festival, so let's not talk about it.
Okay, sure.
uh, but moving on, let's talk about another documentary which I saw, and I don't think you did, Simon.
Which one?
Um, called "Satan Wants You."
No, I wanted to, but I didn't. Tell me about
Yeah. So the festival's still on, so there's still time.
that.
Satan Wants You is very much in the style, like if you've watched a Netflix true crime documentary in the past, like ever, you've definitely
Mhm.
seen films in this style before. So there are a lot of talking heads. But for those of you who don't know, there was a whole thing in the 1980s called the Satanic Panic, which was a cultural phenomenon where everyone was suddenly worried about kids worshiping Satan. And a big impetus for this, like it definitely started before this book, but it was there was a book that came out um, called Michelle Remembers, if
Mhm.
memories, which now that I've said it out loud, am I saying her name right?
I don't know.
um, yeah, Michelle Remembers. And it was written by a woman called Michelle with her therapist. And it was all about how she was remembered that when she was a child, these therapy sessions brought out memories of her as a child where she was participated in these satanic rituals that her parents. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But it was all bullshit. It was all, they were just a pair of grifters that wrote a book and ended up making a ton of money from.
Mhm.
Um, and it is a super interesting story because it did really like throw, if the Satanic Panic was already, sparks, then Michelle Remembers was the gasoline on that flame. Um, and it's really, really interesting that so much of that whole cultural phenomenon in the 80s can be traced back to this pair of, to us, local grifters. They are from Victoria, BC.
Oh, are they?
um, and it's just a fascinating look back at the whole moment, uh, and a big part of 80s culture, and I really enjoyed it. Again, if you're not into the talking head style documentary,
Mhm.
it might not be for you. But if you're into these sort of like, how do you couldn't make this up if you tried type story
Yeah.
about, and like, it's interesting, so much stuff happens in this documentary where you're just like, how did people not see this as a red flag? Like, how did, like,
Beauty of
there's
hindsight.
like this book comes out and they're telling the story about how, she was a child and she was in these satanic rituals, and then also she married the therapist right after the book came out. Like, there's just so much stuff where you're like, in today's world where this information spreads so quickly, you would hope that people would
Mm.
be like, oh, this is bullshit, or they would
Yeah,
be confined to
it
the
wouldn't
to the
change.
fringes of social media. But it became this huge cultural phenomenon, and it's just super interesting to watch. And the therapist, whose name escapes me at the moment, has passed. But Michelle's alive, and they couldn't get her, but they did get like a lot of her friends and family to talk about this, and it is just super fascinating to watch, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't know where it's going
Mhm.
to be released, but it's definitely getting a release, so keep an eye out for it, because I
Mhm.
think it's a really interesting. Again, if you like the sort of like true crime type documentary, then I think this is a great one to watch.
Mhm. Cool.
So I hope you get to see it, Simon, because I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, that sounds really up my street. I'll watch that.
Yeah. What else? Let's move on to another one that I saw and you didn't, um, which is a very, very indie, very, very festival film called "With Love and a Major Organ." You did not see this one, correct?
No, but I wanted to watch this. I will try and catch it.
Yeah, there's still time. This is definitely the kind of movie that is not going to get any kind of wide release. It's very low budget, very indie, um, but it takes place in a world where emotional repression is self care, basically. Like everyone
Mm-hmm.
is, and it's a pretty on the nose metaphor about how we use technology to disconnect. There's an app that everyone has on their phone that just tells them how to live their life, to the point where like the main character is the maid of honor to another character's wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, "I'll plan your bachelor party," and she's like, "The app will just do it for me and get everything I like. It's fine." It doesn't like it's a it's our current obsession and addiction with technology taken to its logical extreme. So that's one
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing about it. And the other interesting thing about it is that in this world, there are people like the main character who very much still want to feel their way through life. And they're viewed as like outliers in society. And uh, to bring that, it's I don't want to spoil it too bad, but basically in this world, everyone's heart, like the both metaphysically and physically, is an object, and they
Mm-hmm.
can actually remove it from their body. In fact, in the first scene, the main character witnesses a man ripping his own heart out, and in this case, it's a vase full of flowers, and he then exists without a heart. And about halfway
Huh.
through this movie, the main character rips her own heart out, and then exists as a heartless person for the rest of the movie. And it's super fascinating and super interesting. Like I, I don't want to say anything more because it is so interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely the kind of movie that we talked about before, where like you're just it's I just don't know where you're gonna be able to see this once the festivals are over.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be for everyone, but it's one of those films that it definitely has to rely on the performers a lot more um, than maybe something with more money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's a super interesting idea and a super interesting way of commenting on our current world, and I ended up really liking it. I ended up actually quite liking it, and I've only seen one one of the actors. I've seen the main actress. I've only really seen in one other thing before, which was a film called Violation, and then the other sort of main guy, Hamza Haq, is a up and coming. Actually, he's not. He's up and come now. He's a Canadian. He's a Canadian actor. He's been in a ton of stuff. Um, he stars as a man who like is very repressed, who when she rips her heart out, he gets a hold of it and puts it into his own chest and starts living by her heart. Super interesting. I don't want to say anything more, but you should
Sounds
definitely check it out.
exactly up my street. Sounds like it's made for me.
Yeah, and it's very
Is it a
like
drama or a comedy or what's the
yep,
genre?
yes,
Okay,
yes,
all of the above.
all of the above.
Okay.
Um, it's lightheartedly funny, and then it's also very darkly funny, and it's also very
Mm-hmm.
much commentary on the disconnect between people and
Mm-hmm.
how we choose to live our lives. And I don't think that the ending 100% works for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, but most of the movie really does, and I really enjoyed it.
Mm.
So take that and run with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that for sure. That sounds
Yeah.
exactly my kind of thing.
So we have, I think, three more movies we're going to talk about, but why don't you take us through the next one, which we've both seen, which is the timey-wimey family drama, a family drama.
Family show.
Yeah, which
Indeed.
is the starring Judy Greer. It's called Aporia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, written by I don't remember who's written by. Written and directed by a guy called Jared Moshe, I believe is how you pronounce his name. But Simon, you saw this. Why don't you take us through just the briefest
Oh,
rundown of
okay.
Aporia?
Um,
And this is one I think is going to be a
uh,
bit divisive, because I think you didn't like it, but I did.
well, let's not bury the lead. Aporia is about Judy Greer plays a character called Sophie, who and she has a daughter, and we learn very very early on that her husband is not around. Um, he's been killed. He got killed by a drunk driver, and Judy Greer is in the following 8 months. Her life is basically crumbling around her. Her relationship with her daughter is getting really difficult. Her job is getting too much for her, and in amongst all this, she's involved in the court case against the person who killed her husband, and the eventualities of that she feel aren't fair because she is on a living hell now. She's had so much taken away from her, and she doesn't see justice in what has been decided in that case. So really, her life is falling apart around her, and her husband was basically best friends and workers with a scientist played by Payman Mardi, and um, turns out that they were working on a machine that could transmit a particle through space time and affect things in the past with a gamma ray burst, basically a mini explosion. And their theory was you could use it to affect certain people or people in the past, and it would affect the present, and basically some kind of time sniper. So they're not traveling through time. It's got a real primer feel to it. Like the time
Mm-hmm.
machine is big old, like rusty engine with dials hanging off and pipes. It's glorious. It's exactly the kind of thing I would want to design as a time machine. Is chugging and smoking, and you don't need to know how it works. You just need to know that it works. And when they say it works, it just works. It's not like a slick time travel machine. And basically, they work out that they are able, with some degree of accuracy, to send this particle through time to kill people in the past with this small targeted like gamma explosion, and it would then affect their present, which, because they're in the room, they would seamlessly move into, but everyone outside of that room would only remember the new present as being the only present.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really interesting. I loved the idea. I don't want to say any more really, because they start gripping with a kind of moral quandary that you would expect from this as things happen, and then they do other things to kind of support or eliminate other things, and it's really, really interesting. I really love the idea of, it's a time travel movie but without them time traveling. It's sending this particle through space. I've never seen anything like that before, or space time I should say. And I felt that way throughout. I think it handled its idea of space travel in a really interesting way in it, and there's a lot of primer in here, not in terms of delivery, but in terms of the jankiness of the machine and the moral quandaries that it represents as well. So I love the ideas of this film, but I will say I thought the three leads were quite weak. I didn't think. You've got Judy Greer and Eddie Gathegis, Mal, her husband, who plays a major role in this film without spoiling anything. I didn't feel any connection between those two actors or their characters. I didn't think they had a good uh, husband and wife chemistry. And I also thought the three of their dialogue delivery was a bit emotionless and a bit flat. And I think there was tons of opportunity for some nuanced performances in this film. Um, and I like Judy Greer usually, so I was a bit disappointed, to be honest. But I thought all three were a bit awkward, and I don't think they worked well together. I don't think there was a chemistry. But I love the ideas. I love the ideas, and it was shot pretty well. I think it without spoiling anything, I think it had a perfect ending, and then added a bit more as an ending, which wasn't as perfect as the ending it had right in its hand. But it's a minor point. It's shot very competently. It's edited well. It looks good. So this is definitely a director I would want to see more from. The ideas are fantastic. Just didn't like the performances at all.
It's interesting because I did like not. I didn't think they were like life changing, but I thought Judy Greer was quite good in it actually. As the person at times who was the only one really grappling with the morality of it all. And it might be a case of like, more acting versus better acting, but even that I think is unfair to say. I thought she was quite good. I thought that um, what's his name, Peyton or Payman
Muddy.
Madi. I thought that he's actually a really talented actor. I've seen him in a number of things. I feel like his character was saddled with a lot of exposition because he's the one who is very often being like, "Here's a time machine, and here's how it works," and
Mm,
um, which brings it down. But there are some scenes toward the end where, especially towards the end, I should say, where he has come to understand the quandary they're in and has to make some, I think, difficult choices. And I thought there was some great moments there.
mhm.
Um, but also, like, even if they aren't amazing, I think everyone is at least fine. I thought that the young woman who plays the daughter, uh, what was her name? Faith
So
Faith
I'll
Herman.
find her. She's not on the cast list, but yeah.
Yeah, her name is Faith Herman. I thought she was great.
Hmm.
Especially she has to her like the way her character is swings wildly based on the changes they've made in the past, and I think she handled that really well.
Hmm.
Um, and I also just love. I think it was really actually really well constructed as a film. There's some great moments where people are out and the world is changing around them as someone else is using the machine, and I thought those scenes are all handled really really well. Like just
Hmm.
on the terms of the way the film is constructed. So I really like this movie. I'm really glad that I saw it. It's going to be in cinemas actually this coming week on August 11th. So it's one that when it gets released in your area, I think you should definitely check out for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just missing some emotional intensity for me, and it had lots of potential for it as things start piling up a bit and the stakes start getting pretty serious. I thought it was really missing some intensity.
Yeah,
That could
maybe
be a,
there's definitely
could be
there's
a,
definitely
be a
it's definitely
directing.
sorry, it's definitely hamstrung by a little bit at least by some scenes of exposition that could have been glossed over a lot more, especially
Mm,
given the sort of like unexplainable nature of the machine, which looks like a cross between a V8 and a jet engine and a Roomba.
that's great.
It's
Yeah, I loved it. I love that machine.
I also love there's a lot of great scenes of them being like, well, we have to reconfigure the machine and then like taking it apart and putting it back
Yeah.
together physically. I loved that.
It was very
Um,
Doctor Who, and like ripping pipes out the TARDIS and then plugging them all back in. Like it didn't even pretend to try and be careful with the machine,
yeah,
and I really like that.
yeah, it's really good. Um, but yeah, that's I don't know. I think you should see it. I think it's quite good. I think it's very interesting at least. And you're not wrong. There's a bunch of primer in it. There's also a bunch of like about time in it, in the like change the past, deal with a new present that you
Hmm.
don't remember. I thought a lot of that was really interesting. And I'm going to touch base with you afterward because I thought the last shot of the movie was actually great. And
Okay.
maybe so I'm not sure what part you're saying is added that would be too much.
The, the,
We'll talk about it after.
we'll
Don't
talk
worry about
about afterwards. Yeah, I do want to say, like, I don't want to be. A lot of this movie I really enjoyed. I just missed that. I think it might be a directing thing actually, as well as a performance thing. So I'm sure they're good actors. But it's really nice to see a 48-year-old woman leading a sci-fi film like this. They could have easily made this film with actors 20 years younger than everyone they had on,
it.
as they
Hmm.
did in like Primer Age. And I think there's a bit of a uh, I think there's more opportunity for older women fronting movies like this that we generally don't see very much, and I think it brings a really nice dynamic to it.
Yeah, and I think I really enjoyed that it's not just three. This is going to sound reductive, but I like that it's just not three just white people.
Yeah,
Like it's the cast is quite diverse in a
mhm.
way that does not feel forced,
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
um,
exactly.
and and I really like it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely see it. The
Yeah,
ideas are great, really great.
yeah, and I think like I say, if for me it all resonated a lot. So um, definitely recommend.
Cool.
So we have two more we're going to talk about. I'm going to take us through one more very briefly that you did not have time to see, Simon, although
Mhm.
this one is now available. It's out on demand, so you can just watch it whenever you want. And that is called Sympathy for the Devil.
Mhm.
Um, this is a Nicolas Cage movie. So do with that information what you will. um, but written by a guy called Luke Paradise and directed by Yuval Adler. This story is Nicolas Cage and Joel Kinnaman are not actually, but effectively the only two real characters in it. um, Joel Kinnaman plays an average middle-aged dad who, on his way to the birth of his child, he gets into his car, and then Nicolas Cage, wearing a red suit with bright red hair, gets in the back of the car, holds a gun on him, and says, "We're going to go for a drive." And the rest of the film is basically just them in the car,
Oh
uh,
wow.
as Nicolas Cage is doing full Nicolas Cage, while Joel Kinnaman is being like, "Where are you taking me? I'm not who you think I am." Um,
Mhm.
and they eventually end up at a diner where they have a long, extended conversation about why they're there. And I don't really want to spoil it, um, but here's what I will say: if you have seen Collateral, or if you have seen A History of Violence, you have already seen better versions of this movie in terms of like who exactly is who in the situation and why they are there. Um, I think you will definitely, you've already seen better versions of this movie. That being said, I think it's fine, and I think if
Mhm.
you enjoy Nicolas Cage doing Nicolas Cage, then there is a lot for you enjoying this movie. And I enjoy that. So I enjoyed this movie. But it's not great. It's totally fine.
Uh-huh.
Um, but like, if you're worried about whether or not this is a quote, like air quotes, good movie, then just go rent A History of Violence instead. Like, it's a better version of that story, of the same,
Right.
almost exactly the same story. Um, but if you like Nicolas Cage wearing a red suit with bright red hair, again, like going at times full Nicolas Cage, then
Mhm.
there's a lot to enjoy in this movie. Like, it's not bad. It's not bad.
Is it a bottle movie? Like, is it all in the car?
No, there's the first half or so is in a car, and then they eventually get to a diner where there are a few more people around, where they have this like extended conversation, and eventually it's realized, you know, who they are to one another and why they're in the
Mhm.
situation. Um, but again, like, there are better versions of this movie, but if you like Nicolas
Mhm.
Cage doing the thing that we all think of when we think about Nicolas Cage, then you will like this movie. Like if you like 90s action Nicolas Cage, you're gonna like this movie. Basically, is how
So
I would put it.
you're kind of selling it to me, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not pig Nicolas Cage. It's you know, it's like they cast him and they went, right, we want
Full
Nicolas
cage.
Cage. Like, if you watch the unbearable weight of massive talent, it's that whole
Mhm.
thing about like him versus his public persona. Like, this is his public
Mhm.
persona, like, not his actual talent. But it is also that. So again, there are definitely better versions of this movie out there. It's not going to work for everyone, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was fine. I thought it was it's a solid. It's also like a tight 90 minutes. I think like it's not a big commit to watch these two actors
Yeah.
sort of go at it with one another. And if anything, I would say that Nicolas Cage is fun, and I think I like Joel Kinnaman as a performer, and he almost doesn't
Mhm.
have enough. If there's a fault here, it's that Joel Kinnaman doesn't really have enough to do.
Mhm.
Um, and also at this point, like, Joel Kinnaman is as tall as I am, as far as I know, and his shoulders are roughly the width of Canada, and it's hard to imagine him as just like a regular everyday dad.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it
I
doesn't
like
exist.
just a guy on the way to the birth of my child. Even though I'm built like a brick
Do I
shithouse,
look
and
like Joel Kinnaman?
move like I was raised in the military. It's
Yes. I
there's
do.
some
I do know that very, very well because what was the sci-fi show he did where he was in somebody else's body? Altered Carbon.
Yeah,
Yeah, based on my wife's reaction to Altered Carbon, I completely understand what you're saying. Yeah, he's not normal looking at all.
yeah. He actually apparently has a condition where his rib cage is too big, which I think is, or at least I've heard that.
That sounds like a pickup line. I've actually got this condition that my ribcage is too big.
Yeah,
Makes me look big.
yeah. It's definitely a thing. But anyway, he's a good actor, and I don't think he's enough to do, which doesn't always work when you're across from someone like Nicolas Cage, who can do way too much with way too little.
Yeah, yeah.
So like the balance is off.
So is this worth watching then? I'm getting mixed messages here. Like, is this a recommend?
I think it's a see it for yourself movie for sure. Like for me, if we're giving star ratings, it's a 3 out of 5. Like it's
Okay,
fine.
solid.
It's right up the middle. But again, like you could just watch A History of Violence, and it's a better version of that movie. Like
Right.
like it's the same. Like not to spoil this one, but like they are in many ways almost exactly the same. But A History of Violence is much better.
Mm-hmm.
So do all that. Do with that what you will. I know we were going to have a third guest on this podcast finally, and I know for a fact he hated this movie. So
Right.
and I think it is fine. It's totally fine. So in
Mhm.
the spectrum of I hated it to fine, that's where we are existing with this film.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Good.
good. Well, let's
So,
move on to our last film. Simon, I'll ask you to
right.
take us through this. This is Junta Yamaguchi's River, which is the follow up to Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes. And yeah, take it away.
Okay, well, warning, there's some superlatives coming because what a film. In River, there's a small, like a bed and breakfast, maybe? It's a small,
It's an
like,
inn. It's
family
like an
run,
inn.
an inn hotel in a small town in a valley in Japan. And everything's completely normal with the guests and with the people running it, and the main uh, uh, person, the main staff member going around is played by Riku Fujitani, and she goes and gets some drinks and walks out to the river, which is next to this inn, and time loops back 2 minutes, and the whole rest, 99% of the rest of the movie is then the same 2 minute loop looping back over and over and over. But what I loved about this film is that everyone keeps their consciousness. So everyone remembers each loop. It's not just her, which I was totally expecting to be just your Palm Springs situation where, or your Groundhog Day, where you're the one who keeps the consciousness. The main character is the only one who knows what's going on and has to kind of play everyone else to try and fix it. But in this film, everyone in this bubble, this area of effect of this 2 minute loop, remembers that they're in a 2 minute loop, and it loops over. And by the 12th loop, people are losing their minds. And what's just, without really spoiling anything, it's as these loops go on and on and on, people reveal a bit more about themselves and their relationships with each other, and the things that they're too scared to talk about come out. And it's like they say early on, one of the female owner of the hotel says this time doesn't count. So everyone really takes that as an opportunity to kind of let out all the things that they've been keeping in, and it is just beautiful. And it's uh, well, the kind of film I love, which is everyone works together to solve the problem in the end. And I was, by the end of this film, when they work out uh, a reason for the loop and how to fix the loop, everyone has kind of revealed themselves, and the truths of relationships have come out, and different. Because at the beginning of each 2 minute loop, everyone resets to their initial position. So you could run for the whole 2 minutes and come back to your initial position. So everyone gets a reset, and there's so much in this movie that's about the way we kind of live our lives, and the what we would do if we had time that didn't matter anymore, if we were stuck, if we were able to just be ourselves, even for just 2 minutes at a time. And it's just stunningly beautiful. And the way it's mind blowing, much like his previous film. It's mind blowing how he conceived this and shot this film. because each 2 minute loop is a single take, and sometimes it's snowing and sometimes it's sunny, and you just get the feeling that the time it must have taken, it feels like they go through years of these 2 minute loops. And I just love the cast. I love Riko Fujitani and the way her character evolves, and I love the proprietor of the inn as well. It was just a really wonderful film, and by the end of this film, I just felt so blissfully happy. I haven't felt so happy after a movie since One Cut of the Dead, which is again a Japanese movie where everyone works together to help solve a problem. And um, learning, you told me afterwards that they're actually a theatre group that do live performances. They do devised theatre, and they work together, and they have made then these two perfect time loop movies. And I just, it makes me really happy knowing that it's a group effort as well. So I just adored this film. I just loved it. I can't wait
I
to
mean,
watch it.
yeah, I don't. What else can I even say? Like, it's, it's interesting to me that like so this group, so the director Junta Yamaguchi, who I got to talk to after Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes, which was a delight. He's a delightful person to speak to. Um, and the whole group, which are called Europe Kikaku, uh, they seem like they are having the time of their lives making these movies, and I think they give themselves. I think that history of being stage performers informs their work in really interesting ways. Like Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes was 70 minutes long, and it was shot in 7 continuous 10-minute chunks with no like digital effects. So like there's a point at which they're talking to themselves on a monitor, and like they shot all that stuff first and they synced it all up perfectly. Um, and this is the same. Like every 2 minute loop is one continuous take, and it's clearly shot in these. Everyone is shot from the point of view of this one character, and everyone seems like the acting is a little bit stagey, but in a way that doesn't feel like obnoxious or weird. It
Mm-hmm.
feels. I think the through line for these is that they feel very positive. There's
Mm-hmm.
no other way to really put it, right? They each of these two films, Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes and River, both feel almost like joyous.
Yeah,
They seem to be.
exactly,
They
exactly.
feel very much like the people involved are having the time of their lives making them,
Yeah,
and
and
they have
romantic. They're
and they're
really romantic
they're
movies.
very this one in particular is very romantic, and they're talking about finding just like joy in life, and it's infectiously happy. And
Mm,
I also loved every second of this movie. I'm sure, as with the previous one, it'll go down as one of my favorites of the year,
mm-hmm.
because it is so wonderful. And I hope that it's available. Like it's playing at Fantasia now. I'm sure it'll play at some other festivals later in the year. I sincerely hope it gets a release somehow in North America, because this is a film
Mm.
that I feel like everyone should probably see. Um, it's because it's just wonderful. I don't know what else to say, man. It's just wonderful, and I loved it.
I was trying to work out before I very I'm a clever person. So we're a couple of loops in before I noticed they were all single takes, and I was trying to work out, because I've done filmmaking, like what's the most practical way of making these films, and it would be every shot that has her standing by the river, and then every shot in the certain, like the annex, and every shot outside, and then edit them together in order. Then I was like, no, they're all single takes. Like
Yeah,
they are resetting. It's like it's very stagey. What's really nice about this and Infinite 2 Minutes is that it's very stagey, but the story could only have been told with film, and I
yeah,
love that. Like this is an absolute expression of this medium, and I realized that every single time they're resetting and doing these new takes, and I just love how the snow comes and goes and the weather changes, uh,
and they just don't really pay attention to it. It's great.
and they and do you know what I love about that? Like they, I think that at some point they were filming outside and then it started snowing, or they were prepping it. Like, what if it snows? What if it rains? Well, because we're doing the same 2 minute loop and we're establishing that nothing changes. And so in the film, the characters don't know. They're like, oh, maybe it's just the world shifting. Like, okay, and then
Yeah,
it's just and I
yeah. They
just
just
love
they just hand wave it away. It's great.
I love it, and it takes it now. This film makes a decision in the last act. It takes a slight turn as to the root of all this, and I think some people are going to find that a little. It's not the fatalistic thing that they were perhaps alluding to, but something else. I wasn't sure when it happened, and then when it finished, I was like, yeah, that was absolutely the right move, and I adored it.
Yeah,
But it's still just wonderful, 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 wonderful.
yeah. It's true. It's maybe we should have more stagey people making movies. I don't know, but this is a wonderful
Yes,
film, and I think
definitely.
it's a testament also to Junta Yamaguchi and
Mm,
to the writers, to everyone involved, really, that because they are a crew. The
mm,
writer is Makoto Ueda. Um, that they managed to make these two films that, on the surface, are about nearly the same thing, like people stuck in a 2-minute
mm,
time loop,
mm,
and have them be so distinct. Like,
mm,
to be able to riff on some similar mechanics, but make two very
mm,
distinct, very singular works out of them. And
definitely.
I can't wait to see what they do next. Like,
Yeah, me either.
Beyond the Infinite 2 minutes was 2 years ago. So in 2 years, I sincerely hope I'm seeing a third film from them.
Mm, yeah.
Because this was also, they were both, this is wonderful, and
Well,
I can't wait to see more.
well, now I know they do live performances too. That's on the bucket list. Is to go. I wanted to go to Japan for years anyway, but to go and find wherever they're performing and see what they're like live.
Well, fire up Duolingo and start learning Japanese, I
Start my
guess.
Japanese, maybe.
So uh,
We're not doing stars, are we? But that's a 5-star movie for me.
yeah,
Loved it.
it's a wonderful film. Definitely, if you take away nothing else from this episode, is that you should find and watch River,
Yeah.
because it's excellent.
Hmm.
But I
And
think
that's it.
uh, I think we're going to call it there, because that's all we have to talk about today. The festival itself is still running for another few more days, so if you're in Montreal, definitely go check it out. But definitely check out the program wherever you are, because there's lots of great films that you should be looking for when they're
Hmm.
playing near you. Um, yeah, so if you have been listening to the whole thing, you made it. Congratulations. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, one more time, we do have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/mcsimpson. Um, please feel free to contribute. Every dollar helps. And you also, again, we do have our bonus conversation this week. We talked about um, animation and westerns, and it's a little more freeform, but I think it's a lot of fun.
It's great.
And at $2 Canadian, that's a steal, I think. And if you'd like to help us in a slightly less direct way, just follow us on all the socials, give us 5-star reviews, or subscribe on your podcasting platform of choice, or on YouTube. Those are the things that get us in front of more earballs, so people can enjoy our dulcet tones and our takes on films. Um, and we're just going to, one last time, acknowledge the writer's strike and the actor's strike. Again, nothing we've talked about, good or bad, could have been constructed without the love and attention of the people who made them. And
Hmm.
as a result, you should support those people. Um, and, when it comes to disputes between labor and management, you should just always support labor. It seems like a no brainer, but
Hmm.
apparently we have to say that out loud in 2023 still. Um, thanks, Ronnie. But anyway, last but not last but not least, we do record this in Vancouver on the unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. And one last time, thank you so much for listening and for joining us on this Awesome Friday.
Thank you. Bye.